Nobody looked twice at the old man shivering in the corner of the diner. With his torn coat and muddy boots, he looked like he had nothing to lose and nothing to give. But when he collapsed on the greasy tile floor, only one person rushed to help. Sarah, a waitress who couldn't even afford her rent. She didn't know that the homeless man she was saving was actually Arthur Sterling, the billionaire industrialist who had vanished 2 days prior. She saved his life, but what he did next, it wasn't a thank you. It was a test that would tear her life apart before rebuilding it in ways she never could have imagined. What happens when a good deed is punished by the world, but rewarded by destiny? You won't believe the twist ending. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall. It hammered against the windows of the Rusty Spoon like it was trying to break in. Inside, the diner smelled of burnt coffee, stale grease, and the damp wool of weary customers seeking refuge from the storm. Sarah Jenkins wiped down the counter with a rag that had seen better days. Her feet throbbed in her worn-out sneakers. She glanced at the clock. 10:45 p.m. 15 minutes until her shift ended. 15 minutes until she had to walk back to the studio apartment she was 2 months behind on rent for. Her landlord, Mr. Henderson, had given her a final ultimatum that morning. Pay by Friday, or I'm changing the locks, Sarah. No more sob stories. Sarah! Stop daydreaming and refill the ketchups, barked Rick, the night manager. Rick was a man who wore too much cologne and wielded his tiny amount of power like a sledgehammer. He hated loiterers, which was his code word for anyone who didn't look like they had money. On it, Rick, Sarah said, keeping her head down. She couldn't afford to lose this job. It was the only thing keeping her off the streets. The bell above the door jingled, barely audible over the thunder. A gust of freezing wind swept through the diner, making the few customers in the booths shiver. In walked a man who looked like he had been dragged through a gutter. He was elderly, perhaps in his late 70s, with a thick, matted gray beard. He wore an oversized, stained army jacket and boots held together by duct tape. He was shaking violently, his face pale and gaunt. Rick was around the counter in a second. Hey! No, we're closing. Kitchen's dead. Get out. The old man swayed, clutching the back of a booth for support. Please, he rasped, his voice sounding like grinding gravel. Just water, maybe some hot water. I'm cold. This isn't a shelter, Pops. Beat it, Rick sneered, pointing at the door. I don't want you scaring the paying customers. Sarah watched from behind the counter, her heart squeezing. She saw the man's hands. They were blue. Hypothermia. She knew the look. She'd seen it on her own father before he passed. Rick, let him sit, Sarah interjected, stepping forward. I'll pay for him. Just let him have some soup. We have the leftover chowder. Rick spun around, his face red. You'll pay for him? With what money, Sarah? You can't even buy new shoes. If he sits in your section, and if he makes a mess, you're cleaning it up off the clock. Fine, Sarah said, grabbing a menu. She walked over to the old man and gently took his arm. He flinched, as if expecting a blow. It's okay, she whispered, guiding him to table 4, the one furthest from the door and the draft. Sit down. My name is Sarah. I'm going to get you something warm. The man looked up at her. His eyes were startlingly clear, a piercing, icy blue that seemed out of place in his weathered face. For a second, the fog of exhaustion in his gaze cleared, and he looked at her with an intensity that made her pause. He looked analytical. Thank you, Sarah, he whispered. You were kind. She rushed to the kitchen, grabbing a bowl of clam chowder and a hot tea. She paid for it out of her tip jar, her entire take for the night, $12. When she returned, the man was trembling so hard the table was shaking. She set the soup down. Here, eat slowly. He took a spoonful, his hand shaking so much that half of it spilled onto his beard. He looked humiliated. Sarah didn't flinch. She grabbed a napkin and gently dabbed his chin. Don't worry about it. Let me help. She helped him lift the spoon. He ate ravenously, the color slowly returning to his cheeks. Why? He asked suddenly, his voice stronger. Why? What? Why help me? Your boss. He's right. I can't pay you back. I have nothing. Sarah sighed, looking out at the rain. Because I know what it's like to be invisible. Besides, she smiled sadly, nobody should be alone in a storm. The man stared at her, his eyes narrowing as if he were memorizing her face. No, no one should. Suddenly the man gasped. His hand flew to his chest, clutching the dirty fabric of his jacket. The spoon clattered to the floor. "Sir?" Sarah asked, alarmed. His face turned a terrifying shade of purple. He tried to speak, but only a gurgle came out. Then his eyes rolled back and he slumped forward, smashing his face into the bowl of soup. "Oh my God!" Sarah screamed. "Rick, call 911!" Rick looked over from the cash register, looking more annoyed than concerned. "You've got to be kidding me. The bum is probably overdosing." "He's having a heart attack," Sarah yelled. She dragged the man's heavy body out of the booth and onto the floor. She checked for a pulse. Nothing. "He's dead," a customer in the next booth said, holding up his phone to record the scene. "That guy is gone." "No!" Sarah shouted. She ripped open the man's dirty jacket. Underneath, she noticed something strange. His shirt, though filthy, was silk, high quality. She didn't have time to process it. She interlaced her fingers and began chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Come on," she gritted out, sweat forming on her brow. "Come on, don't you die on me." Rick was on the phone, but he was complaining to the operator about a vagrant causing a disturbance, not urgently asking for an ambulance. Sarah ignored him. She ignored the customer's filming. She focused entirely on the rhythm. Staying alive. That was the beat. 2 minutes passed. Her arms were burning. The man's lips were gray. "Give it up, Sarah," Rick said, walking over. "He's gone. You're touching a corpse. It's unsanitary." "Shut up!" She screamed, a ferocity in her voice that silenced the entire diner. She pumped harder. Suddenly, the man's body jerked. A horrific, ragged gasp tore through his throat as air rushed back into his lungs. He coughed violently, his eyes flying open in panic. "It's okay. You're okay," Sarah cried, holding his head up. "I've got you." The man looked at her, dazed, terror fading into recognition. He reached out with a cold hand and gripped her wrist with surprising strength. He tried to speak, but the sirens were already wailing outside. Paramedics burst in, pushing Rick aside. They took over, loading the man onto a stretcher. As they wheeled him out, the man's eyes never left Sarah. He mouthed something to her through the oxygen mask. It looked like, "Remember." And then he was gone, the ambulance doors slamming shut on the only good deed Sarah had done that week. She stood there, covered in sweat and chowder stains, her hands trembling. Rick walked up to her, slow and menacing. Well, that was a show. "He lived," Sarah said, breathless. "Yeah, and you drove away my paying customers with your screaming. You gave free food to a vagrant against my direct orders. And you created a biohazard in the dining area." Rick opened the till and pulled out a $20 bill. He threw it at Sarah's feet. "That's for your shift. Get out. You're fired." 3 days later, Sarah was sitting on the floor of her apartment packing her life into cardboard boxes. She had been fired on a Tuesday. It was now Friday. The landlord, Mr. Henderson, had been true to his word. The eviction notice was taped to the door. She had to be out by 5 p.m. "It's just stuff," she muttered to herself, wrapping a framed photo of her parents in a newspaper. Just stuff. But it wasn't just stuff. It was her safety. She had applied to 5 diners in the last 2 days. No one was hiring. Rick had apparently badmouthed her to the other managers in the district, labeling her as insubordinate and drama-prone. She had $42 in her pocket. That might get her a hostel for 2 nights. After that? The shelter. A sharp knock at the door made her jump. Henderson, she thought. He's early. She stood up, wiping dust from her jeans, and opened the door, ready to beg for one more day. But it wasn't Mr. Henderson. Standing in the hallway of her rundown building was a man who looked like he had stepped out of a magazine. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that probably cost more than the entire building. He held a leather briefcase and wore rimless glasses. He was tall, severe, and utterly out of place. "Miss Sarah Jenkins?" he asked. His voice was smooth, professional, and devoid of emotion. Yes? Sarah said, gripping the door frame. If you're a bill collector, you can see the boxes. I'm leaving. I am not a bill collector, the man said. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. Jameson Cavendish, Esquire, Senior Partner, Cavendish, and more. I represent the estate of Arthur Sterling, the man said. Sarah frowned. I don't know an Arthur Sterling. You have the wrong house. I believe I have the right person, Cavendish said. Mr. Sterling was a patient at St. Jude's Hospital. He passed away early this morning due to complications from heart failure. Sarah felt a pang of sympathy, but mostly confusion. I'm sorry to hear that, but I really don't know who. He was the man you performed CPR on at the Rusty Spoon 3 nights ago, Cavendish interrupted. Sarah froze. The homeless man. The man with the piercing blue eyes. The homeless man? His name was Arthur? Arthur Sterling was not homeless, Miss Jenkins, Cavendish said, his eyes scanning the hallway with distaste. He was the founder and CEO of Sterling Industries. His net worth was estimated at $4.2 billion. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Sarah grabbed the door handle to steady herself. Billion? With a B? But he was wearing rags. He was starving. Mr. Sterling was eccentric in his final years, Cavendish said carefully. He often tested people. He believed that to see the true nature of humanity, one must observe it from the bottom. Sarah stared at him. Okay. Well, I'm glad I could help him have a few more days. But why are you here? Cavendish checked his watch. Mr. Sterling left very specific instructions regarding his last will and testament. He requested your presence at the reading of the will. Me? Sarah laughed nervously. Why? Did he leave me a thank you note? I cannot disclose the contents of the will until the reading, Cavendish said. However, I am authorized to provide you with a stipend for your time. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to her. It was thick. Sarah opened it. Inside was a stack of $100 bills. She quickly counted. $2,000. It was enough to pay her back rent and keep the apartment for another month. This is for me? Tears welled in her eyes. That is merely for your attire and transportation, Cavendish said stiffly. The reading is tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Sterling Estate in the Highlands. A car will collect you at 9 a.m. He turned to leave, then paused. Miss Jenkins, a word of advice? Yes? The Sterling family. They are grieving. But they are also complex. Mr. Sterling had no children of his own, but he has a nephew, Marcus, and a niece, Elena. They expect to inherit the empire. Your presence there will be disruptive. Be prepared. Disruptive how? Sarah asked. Cavendish adjusted his glasses, a flicker of something human crossing his face. Pity? Let's just say that Arthur Sterling was a man who enjoyed games. And I believe, Miss Jenkins, that he has just made you the most important player on the board. With that, he walked down the hall, his expensive shoes clicking on the dirty linoleum. Sarah stood there, holding the envelope of cash. She looked at her eviction notice, then at the card. She closed the door and slid to the floor. She had saved a billionaire. And now she was being invited into the lion's den. What she didn't know was that Marcus Sterling, the nephew, had already hired a private investigator to find out who the diner girl was. And he had no intention of letting a waitress take a single dime of his inheritance. At that very moment, across the city in a glass-walled penthouse, Marcus was staring at a photo of Sarah on his tablet. She's a nobody, Marcus sneered, sipping a scotch. A grifter who got lucky. If Uncle Arthur left her anything, we'll destroy her. We'll dig up every skeleton she has. She doesn't have many skeletons, sir, his assistant said nervously. Just debt. Marcus smiled, a cold, predatory shark smile. Debt is a skeleton, if you know how to use it. By the time I'm done with Sarah Jenkins, she'll wish she had let the old man die. The car that arrived for Sarah at 9 a.m. sharp was not a taxi. It was a black Rolls-Royce Phantom, a vehicle that cost more than the entire neighborhood Sarah lived in. Neighbors peered out from behind cracked blinds as the driver, A stoic man named Franklin held the door open for her with white-gloved hands. Sarah had spent 3 hours that morning trying to look presentable. She had gone to a department store with the cash Cavendish gave her and bought a modest black dress, a gray blazer, and sensible black flats. She had tied her hair back in a severe bun. She looked professional, but she felt like a child playing dress-up. As the car glided through the city and up toward the Highlands, the scenery changed. The graffiti and cracked sidewalks of her district gave way to manicured lawns, iron gates, and security patrols. "Nervous, miss?" Franklin asked, his eyes catching hers in the rearview mirror. "Terrified," Sarah admitted. "Do you know them, the family?" Franklin hesitated. "I drove Mr. Sterling for 20 years. I know them." "And?" "Mr. Sterling was a lion, miss. His nephew and niece. They are hyenas. Watch your back." The car turned through a massive set of wrought iron gates adorned with the letter S. The driveway was a mile long, winding through a private forest before the estate came into view. Sterling Manor was a monstrosity of stone and glass, a modern Gothic fortress overlooking the ocean. It looked cold. It looked impenetrable. Franklin parked in the circular driveway. "We're here. Good luck." Sarah stepped out, the cool sea breeze hitting her face. The front doors, massive slabs of oak, were already open. Cavendish was waiting for her. "Right on time," the lawyer said, though he didn't smile. "They are waiting in the library. Follow me. Do not speak unless spoken to, and do not let them see you bleed." "Bleed?" Sarah asked, hurrying to keep up with his long strides. Metaphorically, they smell fear. They walked through a hallway lined with marble busts and oil paintings of stern-looking men. Finally, Cavendish pushed open a set of double doors. The library was cavernous, smelling of old paper and expensive scotch. A fire roared in the hearth, though the room wasn't cold. Sitting on a Chesterfield sofa were 2 people who looked like they had stepped out of a fashion magazine and were angry about it. Marcus Sterling was handsome in a cruel, sharp-edged way. He was 35, wearing a suit that was tailored to the millimeter, sipping a glass of amber liquid. Next to him sat Elena Sterling, younger, perhaps 28, scrolling on her phone with an air of profound boredom. She wore black, but it was a low-cut, flashy black dress that looked more appropriate for a cocktail party than a morning event. They both looked up as Sarah entered. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "So," Marcus drawled, not standing up, "this is the stray." "Marcus," Cavendish warned, taking his place at the head of a massive mahogany desk. "What?" Marcus stood up, walking toward Sarah. He circled her like a predator, inspecting a piece of meat. "Look at her, Elena. Off-the-rack department store dress, shoes that don't quite fit. She's vibrating with anxiety." He stopped in front of Sarah, invading her personal space. He smelled of whiskey and mint. "Tell me, darling, how did you do it? Did you slip something in his drink? Or did you just give him a sob story about your sick cat and your unpaid rent?" Sarah clenched her fists at her sides. "I gave him soup," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "And I tried to save his life while he was dying. Where were you?" The room went silent. Elena looked up from her phone, a smirk playing on her lips. "Feisty, I like it. She thinks she has a moral high ground." Marcus laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "I was in Tokyo closing a merger, you little parasite. I was running the company that built this house. While you were... what? Serving eggs?" "That's enough." Cavendish slammed a file down on the desk. "Sit down, Marcus. We are here to execute the last will and testament of Arthur Sterling. This is a legal proceeding. If you cannot behave, I will have security remove you." "You wouldn't dare," Marcus sneered, but he retreated to the sofa. "Get on with it, James. Read the paper. Give the girl her $5,000 for. Services rendered, so she can leave. Her cheap perfume is giving me a headache." Sarah took the seat indicated by Cavendish, a stiff wooden chair set apart from the family. She felt small, isolated, and surrounded by enemies. Cavendish cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. He didn't pick up a paper document. Instead, he picked up a remote control. "Mr. Sterling knew that this reading would be contentious," Cavendish said. He chose to record his final wishes. He pressed a button. A large screen descended from the ceiling above the fireplace. The lights in the library dimmed. Static crackled on the screen, and then Arthur Sterling appeared. He was sitting in this very room, wearing the same silk shirt he had died in, though it was clean then. He looked pale, tired, but his eyes, those fierce blue eyes Sarah remembered, were sharp as diamonds. "Hello, family," the video Arthur said. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Elena finally put her phone away. "If you are watching this," Arthur continued, his voice raspy, "I am dead. I hope it was quick. I hope I didn't suffer. But knowing the stress you two have caused me over the years, I probably died of a stroke yelling at one of you." Sarah stifled a gasp. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Arthur said. "I built Sterling Industries from a garage in 1975. I sacrificed my marriage, my health, and my sanity for it. I thought I was building a legacy for my family." He leaned into the camera. "But I watched you grow up. Marcus, you treat the company like a personal piggy bank. You fire good people to boost quarterly numbers by a fraction. You are cruel." Marcus's jaw tightened, a vein throbbing in his temple. "And Elena," Arthur looked at the lens as if staring into her soul, "you have never worked a day in your life. You spend more on handbags in a month than most of my employees make in a year. You are vacant." "This is ridiculous," Elena hissed. "Turn it off." "I will not," Cavendish said calmly. "I spent the last month of my life wandering the city," Arthur continued. "I dressed as a beggar. I wanted to see if anyone would treat Arthur Sterling the man with kindness, rather than Arthur Sterling the billionaire with sycophancy. I walked past your penthouse, Marcus. The doorman kicked me out. I sat outside your favorite boutique, Elena. You stepped over me and complained that I smelled." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. He had been there. He had tested them. "I went to 7 restaurants, 3 churches, 2 shelters. I was ignored, mocked, and threatened. Until I walked into the Rusty Spoon." The camera angle shifted slightly as Arthur leaned back. "I was dying. I felt my heart giving out. And a young woman named Sarah Jenkins gave me her seat. She bought me food with her own money. She touched my face with kindness. She fought for my life when my own body was giving up." On the screen, Arthur smiled, a genuine, warm smile that transformed his face. "She didn't know who I was. She expected nothing. That is a rare commodity in this world. Integrity." "Get to the money, old man," Marcus muttered, his knuckles white. "Now, to the bequests," Arthur said, holding up a sheet of paper. "To my nephew, Marcus, and my niece, Elena." He paused for dramatic effect. "I leave the sum of $5 million each." Marcus shot up from the couch. $5 million? That's an insult. The estate is worth billions." "Sit down," Cavendish barked. $5 million, Arthur repeated on screen, ignoring the outburst he knew would happen. "On the condition that you never set foot in Sterling Industries again. You are removed from the board, effective immediately." Elena shrieked. "You can't do this. I have bills. $5 million won't last me 5 years." "And regarding the remainder of my estate," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a serious, heavy tone, "my real estate holdings, my art collection, my patent portfolio, and my 60% controlling interest in Sterling Industries." The room was so quiet, you could hear the fire crackling. Sarah felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She wanted to run. She knew what was coming, and she knew it was going to paint a target on her back. "I leave it all to Sarah Jenkins." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had landed, but hadn't yet detonated. Sarah stared at the screen, her mouth open. All of it? Then the explosion happened. Marcus roared, a primal, animalistic sound of rage. He grabbed a heavy crystal decanter of scotch and hurled it at the screen. It shattered against the wall just inches from the projection, showering the expensive carpet in glass and alcohol. "You senile old bat!" Marcus screamed at the frozen image of his uncle. He spun around to face Sarah. His eyes were bloodshot, bulging with fury. "And you witch!" He lunged for her. Sarah scrambled back, her chair screeching against the floor, toppling over. She fell back, throwing her hands up to protect her face. But Marcus never reached her. Two large men in dark suits, security guards Cavendish had clearly stationed outside the doors, burst in and grabbed Marcus by the arms. He thrashed, spitting and cursing. "Get your hands off me, this is my house. I own this," Marcus yelled. "Actually," Cavendish said, standing up and buttoning his jacket calmly. "You don't. Ms. Jenkins does." Elena was hyperventilating on the sofa. "This is a joke. It's a sick joke. James, tell me this is a prank. He can't leave the company to a waitress. She doesn't even have a college degree. She serves burgers." "Ms. Jenkins is the sole beneficiary," Cavendish stated. "However, there is a codicil, a clause." Marcus stopped struggling for a moment. "A clause?" "Sit down, Marcus, and I will explain. If you attempt to attack Ms. Jenkins again, I will have you arrested for assault, and the $5 million bequest will be voided." The guards released Marcus. He straightened his suit, breathing heavily, staring at Sarah with pure, unadulterated hatred. "Talk, James." Cavendish turned to Sarah. She was being helped up by Franklin, the driver. She was shaking. "Ms. Jenkins," Cavendish said gently. Arthur knew this would be a burden. He did not want to hand you an empire just to watch it crush you. He wanted to give you a chance to prove that the kindness you showed him wasn't a fluke. Cavendish picked up a document. The integrity clause. Sarah Jenkins inherits the assets immediately, but the controlling shares of the company are held in a temporary trust for 30 days. 30 days? Sarah whispered. "What happens in 30 days? For the next 30 days, Cavendish explained, you must step into the role of acting CEO of Sterling Industries. You must show up every day. You must make decisions. You must live in this house. You cannot sell any assets. And you cannot quit." "She'll run it into the ground in a week," Marcus spat. "If," Cavendish continued, ignoring him, "at the end of 30 days, Ms. Jenkins decides she does not want the responsibility, she can walk away with $10 million, and the company reverts to Marcus. However, if she quits before the 30 days are up, she gets nothing, not a dime, and the company goes to Marcus." Sarah looked around the room. The luxury, the anger, the weight of it all. I don't know anything about business. I can't be a CEO." Marcus smiled, a cruel, slippery smile returning to his face. "Exactly. She knows she's trash. She'll take the $10 million in a month. Hell, she'll quit by Monday." He walked over to Sarah, leaning in close. The guards tensed, but he didn't touch her. He just whispered, "You're out of your depth, little girl. This isn't a diner. This is a shark tank. If you try to run my company, I will eat you alive. I will humiliate you in the press. I will sabotage every meeting. And I will make you wish you died in that gutter with my uncle. Do the smart thing. Quit now." Sarah looked at him. She saw the entitlement. She saw the bullying. It reminded her of Rick, her manager. It reminded her of her landlord. It reminded her of every person who had ever looked down on her because she was poor. Something inside her snapped. It wasn't anger. It was resolve. Arthur Sterling had seen something in her. He had trusted her. If she quit now, Marcus won. And if Marcus won, the company, and the thousands of people who worked for it, would be at the mercy of this monster. Sarah straightened her back. She smoothed down her cheap blazer. She looked Marcus dead in the eye. "I won't quit," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. Marcus laughed. "We'll see." "I accept the terms, Mr. Cavendish," Sarah said, turning to the lawyer. "When do I start?" "Monday morning," Cavendish said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "I suggest you rest, Ms. Jenkins. You live here now. Franklin will show you to the master suite." "The master suite?" Elena shrieked. "That's my future room." "Not anymore," Sarah said. She didn't shout. She just stated it as a fact. She turned and followed Franklin out of the library. As the doors closed behind her, she heard the sound of another glass shattering against the wall. She had survived the reading of the will, but as she walked up the grand staircase to a bedroom bigger than her entire apartment building, Sarah knew the real danger was just beginning. Marcus wouldn't wait 30 days. He was going to try to destroy her, and he had billions of dollars and a lifetime of connections to do it. She was a waitress in a billionaire's world. And the sharks were circling. Monday morning arrived with the gray, suffocating weight of a tombstone. Sarah stood at the base of the Sterling Tower, a 70-story needle of glass and steel that pierced the Seattle skyline. It was beautiful, intimidating, and terrifying. She smoothed the skirt of her new suit. Cavendish had arranged for a wardrobe consultant over the weekend, insisting that armor is essential for battle. She wore a tailored navy suit, sharp heels, and a simple pearl necklace. She looked the part of a CEO, but inside, her stomach was doing somersaults. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "It's just serving people, just different people." She walked into the lobby. The security guards nodded, but she saw the whispers. The news had broken over the weekend. Waitress inherits billions. The headlines screamed, Cinderella or con artist? She took the private elevator to the top floor. When the doors opened, she wasn't greeted by a friendly receptionist. She was greeted by chaos. Phones were ringing off the hook. People were running back and forth with files. And standing in the middle of it all, leaning against the door of the CEO's office, her office, was Marcus. "You're late," Marcus said, checking his Rolex. It was 8:01 a.m. "I'm on time, Marcus," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Please move." "We have an emergency board meeting in 5 minutes," Marcus said, a predatory glint in his eyes. "The Asian markets are crashing. We need to authorize a liquidity freeze on the manufacturing division. I've prepared the documents." He shoved a thick stack of papers into her chest. "Sign the last page. I'll handle the rest, unless you want to lose $50 million in the next hour." Sarah froze. Liquidity freeze? Manufacturing division? The words meant nothing to her. She felt a wave of panic. This was exactly what he warned her about. She was drowning in jargon. I need to read it first," Sarah stammered. "There's no time," Marcus snapped, his voice booming across the office floor. Secretary stopped typing to watch. "This is business, Sarah, not a diner. You don't have time to ask the cook if the soup is fresh. Sign the damn paper, or you'll bankrupt us on your first day." Sarah looked at the paper. Her hand hovered over the pen. The pressure was immense. Marcus was looming over her, radiating authority. Then she remembered Arthur. She remembered the way he looked at the menu at the diner. He didn't just order, he analyzed. She looked at Marcus. "Why are you so eager?" "Excuse me?" "You hate me," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. "You want me to fail. So if this document saves the company money, why are you pushing me to sign it? You'd be happy if I lost $50 million. Marcus blinked. For a split second, his mask slipped. Sarah pulled the file back. "I'm not signing anything until I understand it." "Cancel the meeting." "You can't cancel the board meeting. The directors are waiting." "Then let them wait," Sarah said. She walked past him and pushed open the heavy oak doors of the boardroom. 20 men and women in expensive suits fell silent as she entered. They looked at her with skepticism, amusement, and open disdain. Sarah walked to the head of the table. The chair looked enormous. She didn't sit. She stood behind it, gripping the leather backrest. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Sarah Jenkins." "We know who you are," a man with a white mustache said. "You're the girl who served Arthur his soup. Now, about the liquidity freeze." "There will be no freeze today," Sarah said, taking a gamble. She looked at the document Marcus had given her. She scanned the text, looking for keywords. She saw the words, plant closure and pension suspension. Her eyes widened. This wasn't just a financial move. It was a layoff order. "This document," Sarah said, holding it up, "authorizes the closure of the Ohio factory. It pauses the pension fund for 3,000 workers." She looked at Marcus, who had followed her in, looking furious. "You told me it was a liquidity freeze. You didn't tell me it was firing 3,000 people." "It's the same thing," Marcus argued. "We need to cut costs to save the stock price." Sarah looked around the table. Is the company in debt? No, the man with the mustache admitted, but profits are down 2% this quarter. So we're firing 3,000 families because we made 2% less profit, Sarah asked. The silence in the room changed. It wasn't mocking anymore. It was uncomfortable. I've been poor, Sarah said quietly. I know what it's like to lose a paycheck. It doesn't just mean a lower stock price. It means no heating. It means hungry kids. Arthur Sterling didn't build this company to starve people. She ripped the document in half. Find another way to save 2%, she ordered. Meeting adjourned. She turned and walked into her office, closing the door. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed into the chair, trembling. She had survived day one, but she had made a dangerous enemy. Outside the door, Marcus was on his phone. She's smarter than she looks, he hissed into the receiver. Plan A failed. She has a conscience. We need to use that against her. Initiate Plan B. Destroy her reputation. I want the world to hate her by Friday. 2 weeks passed. Sarah threw herself into the work. She hired a tutor to teach her finance at night. She barely slept. She was surviving, but barely. Every day was a minefield of sabotage. Missing files, wrong meeting times, accidental coffee spills on important contracts. She knew it was Marcus, but she couldn't prove it. Then came the invitation to the Sterling Foundation Gala. It was the social event of the season, a black-tie charity dinner attended by politicians, celebrities, and the business elite. You have to go, Cavendish told her. Arthur was the face of this charity. If you don't show up, the press will say you don't care about his legacy. Marcus will be there, Sarah said, rubbing her temples. He will, Cavendish nodded. And Elena. Watch out for Elena. Marcus uses a hammer. Elena uses a poisoned needle. The night of the gala, Sarah arrived at the ballroom in a stunning emerald green gown. She felt beautiful, for the first time in years. But as soon as she stepped onto the red carpet, the flashbulbs blinded her. Sarah! Sarah! Is it true you were a stripper before this? A reporter yelled. Sarah! Did you seduce the old man for the money? She kept her head down, rushing inside. The ballroom was glittering with chandeliers and ice sculptures, but the atmosphere was toxic. As she walked through the crowd, conversation stopped. People whispered behind their hands. Marcus and Elena were holding court near the bar. Elena saw her and glided over, smiling a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sarah! You made it! Elena cooed. And look at you, wearing that. It's very brave. What's wrong with it? Sarah asked, self-conscious. Nothing, dear. It's just very last season. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Elena laughed and patted Sarah's arm. Oh, by the way, there's a surprise guest for you. Someone from your past life to make you feel comfortable. Elena pointed to the stage. The music stopped. Marcus tapped a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus announced, his voice smooth as silk. Tonight we honor my Uncle Arthur, but we also welcome our new interim CEO. And to help us understand where she comes from, we have a special testimonial. A man walked onto the stage. Sarah's blood ran cold. It was Rick, her old manager from the Rusty Spoon. He was wearing an ill-fitting suit, sweating under the lights. He looked nervous, but he held a piece of paper in his shaking hand. Hi, Rick stammered into the mic. I'm Rick. I was Sarah's boss for 3 years. Tell us, Rick, Marcus urged from the side. What kind of employee was Sarah? Rick looked at Sarah. He looked at the crowd. Then he looked at Marcus, who nodded subtly. Sarah knew Rick needed money. She knew he was weak. She was difficult, Rick lied. She was always late. And we had issues with the till. Money went missing whenever she was on shift. The crowd gasped. A murmur of outrage rippled through the room. Liar, Sarah whispered, tears stinging her eyes. And the tips, Rick continued, gaining confidence. She used to steal tips from the other waitresses. She was desperate. I fired her because I caught her trying to steal a customer's wallet. The same day she helped Mr. Sterling. Thank you, Rick, Marcus said, taking the mic back. He looked at Sarah with mock pity. There you have it, folks. A thief, a liar, and now the CEO of a billion-dollar company. Is this who we trust with Arthur's legacy? The room turned on her. The looks of disdain became looks of disgust. People actually stepped away from her, as if she were contagious. It's not true, Sarah cried out, but her voice was lost in the cavernous room. Security, Marcus said calmly. I think Miss Jenkins is upset. Perhaps she should be escorted out before she steals the silverware. 2 guards stepped forward. Sarah felt her world collapsing. This was it. The humiliation was total. If she was dragged out now, she would lose all respect. The board would force her out. The 30-day clause would be broken by a vote of no confidence. She looked at Rick, who was avoiding her gaze. She looked at Marcus, who was smirking. She turned to run. She just wanted to get out. She wanted to go back to her small apartment and hide. Wait! The voice was deep, booming, and authoritative. It cut through the murmurs like a knife. It came from the back of the room. A man stepped forward. He was elderly, in a wheelchair, pushed by a nurse. He was frail, but his presence was immense. It was George Allister, the business rival Marcus had tried to merge with, and one of the most respected men in the city. I would like to speak, Allister said, rolling into the center of the room. Marcus frowned. Mr. Allister, this is a family matter. Quiet, boy, Allister snapped. He looked at Rick on stage. You say this woman stole wallets? Why, yes, sir, Rick stuttered. Strange, Allister said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, battered notebook. Because I was eating at the Rusty Spoon 2 months ago, incognito, much like Arthur did. Rick paled. I left my wallet on the table, Allister said, his voice rising. It had $2,000 cash in it. I walked 3 blocks away before I realized it. And do you know who ran 3 blocks in the rain to return it to me? Do you know who refused a reward? He pointed a shaking finger at Sarah. It was her. The room went silent again. Allister turned his wheelchair to face the crowd. Arthur Sterling told me before he died that he had found a diamond in the rough. I didn't believe him, but watching this circus? He glared at Marcus. I believe him now. And I believe you, Marcus, are a petty, vindictive liar who paid this man to perjure himself. Allister looked at Sarah. Don't run, child. Stand up. If you ran a mile to return a wallet you could have stolen, you have more integrity in your little finger than this entire room combined. Sarah wiped her tears. She stopped backing away. She looked at Marcus. His smirk was gone, replaced by a look of sheer panic. I'm not leaving, Sarah said, her voice ringing out in the silence. And Rick, you're fired. The crowd erupted. Not in laughter, but in whispers of awe. The tide had turned, but Marcus wasn't done. As Sarah stood tall, she saw Marcus pull out his phone and type a furious message. He looked at her, and his eyes said one thing. Part 7. The End Game. Now it gets violent. Sarah knew the social war was won, but the physical danger was just beginning. Marcus had nothing left to lose, and a billionaire with nothing to lose is the most dangerous thing on earth. It was the night of the 29th day. One more day. If Sarah survived until midnight tomorrow, the company was hers, and Marcus would be cut off forever. The storm that had started the day she met Arthur seemed to have returned to Seattle. Rain lashed against the windows of the Rolls-Royce as Franklin drove Sarah home from the office. Almost there, Miss Sarah, Franklin said warmly. Over the last month, the stoic driver had become like a father figure to her. Mr. Cavendish is waiting at the estate with the final paperwork. Suddenly, a blinding light flooded the rearview mirror. A heavy SUV rammed into the back of the Rolls-Royce. Hold on, Franklin shouted, struggling with the wheel. The car spun out of control on the slick, wet asphalt, skidding off the private road and crashing into a ditch. The airbags deployed with a deafening bang. Sarah coughed, her vision blurry. Franklin? Franklin was slumped over the wheel, unconscious, blood trickling from his temple. The back door was ripped open. Strong hands grabbed Sarah by her hair and dragged her out into the mud and rain. She screamed, kicking and scratching, but a cloth soaked in chloroform was pressed against her face. The world went black. She woke up tied to a wooden chair. The smell of gasoline and sawdust filled her nose. She was in an abandoned warehouse, the very factory Marcus had tried to close on her first day. A single spotlight hung above her, and, standing in the shadows, holding a gas can, was Marcus. "Wiki, wiki, Cinderella," Marcus crooned. He looked unhinged. His tie was loose, his eyes wild. He had lost the social war, so he had chosen the nuclear option. "Marcus," Sarah gasped, pulling at the ropes. "You can't do this." "Franklin, is he?" "The old fool is fine, probably," Marcus dismissed her. "This is about us, and the clock." He checked his watch. 11 p.m. "You have 1 hour left." He walked over and slammed a clipboard onto her lap. "Resignation letter. Sign it. Backdated to yesterday. It says the stress was too much, you had a breakdown, and you hand full control back to the family." "I won't sign it," Sarah spat, glaring at him. Marcus laughed, but it was a dry, hollow sound. He began pouring gasoline in a circle around her chair. The pungent fumes made Sarah gag. "You don't get it," Marcus said, striking a match. The flame danced in the darkness. "You sign, and you walk out of here with $10 million and your life. You don't sign." And tragically, the unstable waitress sets fire to the factory she failed to save, perishing in the flames. "You're insane," Sarah whispered. "I am a sterling," Marcus roared, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "I was born to rule this city. I will not let a soup kitchen charity case steal my birthright." He flicked the match. It landed inches from the gasoline trail. Sarah flinched. "Last chance, Sarah. Sign the paper." Sarah looked at the paper. Then she looked at Marcus. She thought of her father. She thought of Arthur shivering in the booth. "No," she said. Marcus's face twisted into a mask of pure hate. "Have it your way." He lit another match. He raised his hand to drop it directly onto the fuel line connected to her chair. Boom! The warehouse doors blew open with a thunderous crash. "Police! Drop the match!" A team of SWAT officers poured into the building, laser sights painting Marcus's chest with red dots. Marcus froze, the match burning his fingers. He dropped it in shock, but a police officer dove forward, smothering the flame before it could ignite the gas. Marcus was tackled to the ground. "Get off me! Do you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are," a voice said from the doorway. Sarah's heart stopped. Walking through the police line, leaning on a cane but looking very much alive, was Arthur Sterling. Marcus, pinned to the floor, looked up and screamed. "Ghost! It's a ghost!" Arthur walked slowly toward Sarah. Cavendish was right behind him, carrying a pocket knife. Cavendish cut Sarah's ropes, and she fell into Arthur's arms, sobbing. "Arthur," she wept, touching his face. "But I felt your heart stop. I saw you die." "You felt my heart stop because I took a medication to induce a temporary cardiac arrest," Arthur explained, his voice gentle. "I had to be sure, Sarah. I had to be dead to the world to see who would try to bury me and who would mourn me." He turned to Marcus, who was being hauled to his feet in handcuffs. "I watched everything, Marcus," Arthur said, his voice cold as ice. "I watched you insult her. I watched you sabotage the company. I watched you hire Rick to lie. And tonight, I watched you try to murder an innocent woman." "Uncle Arthur, please," Marcus begged, tears streaming down his face. "It was a test. I was just testing her. I wouldn't have burned her." "You failed the test," Arthur said. "Cavendish?" The lawyer stepped forward. "The police have the video recording from the warehouse cameras I installed this morning. Attempted murder, kidnapping, arson. You're going away for a long time, Marcus. And Elena is being arrested as an accessory as we speak." "Take him away," Arthur commanded. As the police dragged screaming Marcus out into the rain, Arthur took off his expensive jacket and draped it over Sarah's shoulders, just as she had tried to warm him with soup a month ago. "Why?" Sarah asked, trembling. "Why did you put me through this? The 30 days, the stress." Arthur looked at her with tears in his eyes. "Because, Sarah, to lead an empire, you need to be tough. But to save it, you need to be kind. I knew you were kind. I needed to know if you were tough enough to fight the monsters." He smiled. "You didn't just survive the sharks, Sarah. You tamed them." "So what now?" Sarah asked. "Do you want your company back?" Arthur laughed, linking his arm with hers. "Heaven's number. I'm officially dead, remember? I have a retirement to enjoy in Tahiti. But I need a CEO I can trust to send me my checks." He handed her the keys to the Rolls-Royce that had just pulled up, a fresh one. "The job is yours, Sarah. Permanently. The 30-day clause is over. You own 60% of Sterling Industries. You are the boss." Sarah looked out at the rain, then back at the old man who had changed her life. She smiled. "First order of business," she said. "We're buying the rusty spoon, and we're turning it into a gourmet soup kitchen. Free food for everyone who's cold." Arthur patted her hand. "Excellent decision, Madam CEO." Sarah Jenkins went from being a waitress with $42 to her name to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar empire, all because she showed kindness to a stranger when no one else would. Marcus and Elena lost everything to their own greed, proving that while money can buy power, it cannot buy character. Sarah ran Sterling Industries for 40 years, and she never forgot the lesson of that stormy night. You never know who you are speaking to. The beggar in the corner might just be the king in disguise. What would you have done if you were in Sarah's shoes? Would you have quit when Marcus threatened you, or would you have fought for the legacy? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind. You never know who's watching.